Variety is the spice of life, which is why we highly recommend My Pet Chicken, because they have so much to offer.
You can order day-old chicks and waterfowl, chicken supplies, hatching eggs, and there's a wealth of information on their website. Our favorite part about My Pet Chicken is that you can put together your dream chick order without any breed minimums to make your egg basket super colorful.
So go to mypetchicken.com/drinkandfarm to put in your chick, duckling, or gosling order. That link lets them know that we sent you, and it's a great way to support our podcast and fulfill all of your poultry addiction needs.
Welcome to We Drink and We Farm Things.
This is the farm comedy podcast that is an adult happy hour for the farming community.
We drink adult beverages, talk about the ups and downs of farming things, and give zero clucks about not having the perfect farm life.
We keep it real with you and share the mistakes we've made and what we've learned so you can feel less alone in this farm thing.
We drink things, we farm things, we drink and farm things.
Oh, hey there, Sam.
Oh, hey there, Bev. What you drinking today?
So I made myself a cocktail from the Simple Goodness Sisters cocktail club box.
Oh, you got that?
Yeah, I did.
I'm
I
so
totally
jealous.
got that. Well, I got it for a couple of reasons. I really, really wanted to support their new cocktail club thing because I just thought that that was the coolest thing ever. But also, I thought that I could really up my drink game, if that makes any sense.
Yes.
Because sometimes I think I got just a little stuck, in beer or coffee.
Yeah, that's totally fair. And the nice thing about the cocktails is if you're feeling like you don't want to have too much of a buzz after we record, you just maybe cut the liquor in half.
Yeah, or make a smaller one. Or so this cocktail is called the Garden Tour. And it's a cocktail that has gin in it and 2 ounces, or not 2 ounces, I'm sorry, a half an ounce of they did a small batch syrup as part of the Garden Club box. But it's a lime basil syrup.
Ooh, yummy.
Yeah, and what was really cool about this cocktail is that the gin that they recommend, it's called New American Style Gin, and I was like, I don't know what that is, and I don't even like gin, so I'm probably not going to like this. But Jared and I went to the liquor store. There's only one in our county because, rural Midwest.
Yes.
And I Googled New American Style Gin, and Hendrick's came up as the gin that was recommended for that. And it's actually really good. It's not a dry gin. So dry gin kind of feels like it punches me in the face when I drink it. I don't know how else to describe it. It just
Fair.
It's very shocking to my senses. But this style of gin, it has more of a earthy taste to it.
Okay.
And it's a little smoother. So it was actually a really good drink. And I always pour mine over ice. This is how I drink my bourbon too, because I need to cut the alcohol just a tad. And so that allows me to enjoy the drink longer without the overwhelming alcohol taste. And I just have one. I can't have more than one cocktail because apparently I'm too old for that nowadays. So yeah, there's my really long cocktail story.
Hey, it was a good story though.
So what are you drinking over there?
So today I am drinking a Blake's Hard Cider Company strawberry lemonade.
Yum. I'm so glad you're drinking that. I was hoping you were going to drink one of those because it looks amazing.
It's really good. I saw it on their Instagram and I was like, oh, I need that. And the place that I usually get my booze didn't have it yet. But my husband, he gets to leave the house every day and he gets to go into these places called gas stations. And he found it. And he told me, I got a present for you. And I was like, is it food related? Because this is what we talk about during the day via text message. And he's like, drink. And I'm like, oh. So I totally guessed what it was. But it is a combined tart lemon with sweet, ripe strawberries finished off with 5 apple blend to bring you the strawberry lemonade. And I just saw... Now, this will be a couple weeks old by the time this episode drops, but they are coming out with a blueberry lemonade.
Oh.
So I'm going to have to find that too.
Nice.
But yeah, this is great. It is 6.5% alcohol by volume, so it's got a little punch to it, but it's definitely going to be a summer favorite around here.
I have to see if I can find some of that. Our drink peep this episode is our friend Elizabeth Steves, and she is at Steel02 over on the Instagram. So cheers, lady.
Cheers.
All right. We get to dive right in to our episode topic today.
Yay! I'm excited because I know nothing about this, and I'm very ready to learn if this is something that I want to get into. So I'm going to be probably kind of like the listeners today and just kind of listening, probably throwing in some bad jokes, but also asking some questions. But with no further delay, Bev, what are we talking about today?
Okay, so before I give everybody the topic, I'm going to give just a tad bit of backstory because this backstory is what inspired this to even happen. Ooh. So I don't know if anybody remembers this, but back in January, we talked on the podcast episode about how Jared had started weighing all of our food waste. Mm-hmm. And we talk about that in episode 95, Let's Be Human Together. It was released sometime in mid-January, and we'll put a link to it in the show notes so you guys can find it if you haven't heard that episode yet. But I never followed up on that and like told anybody what ended up happening out of that. Well, we weighed our food until early June, and the total was like 118 pounds.
Oh, wow. That's like a really fit adult human being.
Yeah, it is. It's like a really fit adult human being. Or maybe like both of my kids combined. I don't know.
You go. Hey, there you go. Yeah.
But yeah, it's a lot of food. And the reason why we were weighing our food is because we had listened to a podcast episode and we learned that like 10%-ish of greenhouse gas emissions are caused by methane that's released from food waste that's not able to break down in the landfill. Because landfills are anaerobic environments, which means that they don't have oxygen in them, and food needs oxygen to break down. So instead of breaking down properly, it turns into greenhouse gas and it eventually gets released into the atmosphere. No bueno.
No bueno.
And 40% of all food that's produced is wasted at some point between harvest and the consumer. So like 40% of it is wasted before it even like gets to the grocery store or our tables, which is the part that we don't necessarily have control over. Mm-hmm. And the average family wastes 40% of the food they buy, which is like throwing $200-ish in the trash every month.
Oh, that's terrible. See, I feel like I do pretty good in this department, but I do struggle sometimes when I'm buying fresh produce because if I don't time it out just right, like it's really easy to waste so much money. So that's usually why I just don't buy it.
Have you seen that meme of the lady pulling like lettuce off of a grocery store counter or something? And she's like, do you want to come home and die in the back of my fridge with me? Yeah.
Yeah. No, I will say, I will plug Montana, one of our listeners here. She did post about Misfit Market.
Oh, yeah.
They fixed the problem of ugly food not making it to the supermarket because we Americans are super weird about what our food looks like. Yeah. So, like, it's the ugly fruit and vegetables, but sometimes most of the stuff looks really normal and it's good and it's all organic, but it's just like a weekly or a bi-weekly situation and it's like a reasonable amount. So, like, that, I've been wasting way less with that method. So, I'll just throw that out there if you guys need to look into that. If you're a fruit veggie killer like I am.
That's super awesome. I love that. My parents have been doing that too, and I've been thinking of signing up, but we're about to have a giant garden out there. So I was like, I'll wait until fall.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely going to be pausing mine once my garden really takes off this summer.
So, back to our food waste thing.
Yes.
We kind of lost our way on the weighing and the measuring of it because 2020. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't know. I don't think I have to say anything else, but it was just like, it got mentally taxing to kind of do it. And it was just like, it was a negative thing that we were tracking. And it was just like, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
Like, I understand the benefit of it, but like, what are we doing about it? Like, that's what we really need to be focusing on now instead of the counting of it, because we already know that it's more than we would like it to be.
Yeah, you got a good baseline there. You know, you stuck with it for what, like 5 months?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, so it wasn't too bad. But we realized, oh, wait, like, so one of the things that we can do is, so we already compost and we had already built compost bins. And in fact, I'll get to harvest some of that regular compost out this spring, probably in like a couple of months, I'll be able to open it up. But we realized instead of just composting like in the pile compost, like we have been doing, we could add vermicomposting to our plan to mitigate food waste, which will help us keep more food waste out of the landfills and allows us to feed our garden a little faster than regular composting does, which is like a total win-win.
Vermicomposting. That sounds like it's got some creepy crawly things.
It
happening
does.
there. Like vermin.
So vermicomposting is composting with worms.
Wormies.
Yes. So shortly after we had stopped counting all of our food waste, we bought all the materials we needed to get started. But then 2020 was just still going on. I don't know what else to say about that either.
I mean, it's tough when you already have so many projects in motion on a farm. And like around that time, I imagine your garden was probably booming pretty good too. So everybody, and we're just busy. Even if we're just home all the time and not going anywhere, you find ways to be busy. So I get it. You know, totally get it.
Yeah, so I finally built our composting bin just a couple of weeks ago. So
Hooray!
I was like, yay! Now I can tell everybody all about how amazing vermicomposting is, or composting with worms is.
Yes.
So before we get started, though, I do want to let you know that we do have an episode that's all about composting without worms. So if when you get to the end of this episode, you're like, worm composting is just totally not for me, go check that episode out. It's episode 110. Poop is perfect.
Yes, it is.
And we have a few sources for today's episode. Actually, we have a lot of sources for today's episode because all of my vermicomposting knowledge has come from a whole team of people, which is pretty cool. One of them was Epic Gardening. He's where I got the video for how to build the worm bin. Positively Green podcast actually just did an episode mid-March. It's called How to Get Started with Vermicomposting. And they brought up some things that I hadn't thought of. So I was really happy about that. And I'll share some of those things in this episode. But you definitely want to go listen to theirs because Suzette, Kelsey's new co-host, she has a really cool story for how she got started with her vermicomposting. So I'm not going to tell her story. I'll tell mine. But you definitely want to go hear hers. And Vermicomposting 101 from foodprint.org. Biological Performance did a little article about worm castings. And Worm Composting HQ is where I got some really valuable information about using worm bin leachate. Yes, I said that word right. Worm bin leachate.
What is leachate?
Oh, don't worry. I will get to what all of that stuff is very shortly because I just threw a lot of words out there that we've like never mentioned on the podcast. So there'll be links to all of those things in the show notes. So you definitely want to go check them out. They'll be at drinkandfarm.com/156. Okay. So we'll start with an explanation of vermicomposting. And like I already said, it's composting with worms. And the basics of it is they eat your food and paper scraps and they poop out worm castings.
Hooray, poop.
Yeah. And worm castings are the worm's poop. But don't worry, it's not like cow or donkey poop, so it's not like nasty and sticky and like stinky. It looks a lot like topsoil and it smells really earthy. So you're not gonna like feel squeamish or like grossed out handling it, which is really nice. Mm-hmm. And worm castings are really awesome because they have a super rich mix of enzymes and bacteria, and they contain more humus than is usually found in topsoil. And humus is the organic component of soil that's made from decomposed material, if that is a new word as well. And you put worm castings straight in the garden to feed your plants. The nutrients include like concentrated nitrates, magnesium, potassium, calcium, phosphorus, manganese, iron, cobalt, nitrogen, zinc, copper, carbon. Those are all things that your plants need to grow and be healthy. But it is important to note that worm castings aren't a complete fertilizer. So there are some plants out there where you will need just a little bit more than just worm casting. So I can't think of any of the specific plants off the top of my head, but I do know that there's some nutrients missing from that. So you'll still want to have some sort of like fertilizing plan. Probably like whole compost, like from a compost pile will help make up some of that, or you can get some sort of like liquid organic fertilizer. I'm super into feeding my garden this year. And your vermicomposting system will also produce something called worm leachate, and that's the liquid that gathers at the bottom of your bin.
Ooh.
And yes, it sounds really gross, but because your bin doesn't smell, like the leachate doesn't smell either. And in fact, if your leachate smells, it means that there's a problem and you should check it. But anyways, leachate is not worm tea, although it does get confused with worm tea a lot. Worm tea is made by mixing the worm castings and water and letting it ferment for like a week or so. Ooh. And worm tea is really great for your plants. But leachate, on the other hand, should be used with caution because it's not actually consumed by your composting worms. So like the bad bacteria and stuff doesn't get cleaned by going through your healthy worm's guts. So the worm bin leachate can potentially contain like bacteria or toxins that can be harmful to you or burn your plants. So because of the risk of that, it's actually not recommended that you use raw worm bin leachate on edible plants. So one thing you can do with it is you can water it down because you don't want to use it at full potency. You can water it down and like spray it on your lawn, or maybe spray it like at the base of flowers or in the dirt, but don't like spray it on the things that you would eat. Like you wouldn't want to like use it as like a foliar spray, basically. Okay. I think is what they're trying to say. So you can still use it to feed your plants if you wanted to, but make sure that you water it down. And I would definitely do some more reading, like very specifically on leachate before you use it. Worm bins are kind of wet and they do create a lot of liquid. So it's good to know the difference between worm tea and leachate because they are definitely different. So now let's talk about how I built my worm bin. And I made mine out of 3 Rubbermaid roughneck totes and a cooler spigot. So it basically costs like $35, I think, to make. I bought the really good roughneck totes and like the slightly bigger ones. Mm-hmm. And like I already said, there's a link in the show notes to the video that I used to build mine. It was from Epic Gardening. So basically the way that the worm bin is set up is the bottom tote only has one hole in it for the cooler spigot. It's installed at the bottom so that you can drain that leachate. And I had to use plumber's putty on mine so that it didn't leak. I bought several different spigots and they leaked.
Oh, no.
I know. But plumber's putty takes care of that, or you could try like some plumber's tape. So don't despair. There's totally fixes for that. And then the next 2 bins have holes drilled all over the bottom. And that's so that your leachate can drain to the bottom tote, and also so that your worms can move between the 2 bins once you get enough material and enough worms in there built up that you can have, it be multi-tiered. But when you first start out, everything's only going to be in that very top tote. And you drill holes in the lid and along the top ledge of each tote so that your worms can breathe, because worms need oxygen, obviously. And the light from these holes helps keep them under the surface of the material that you put inside of your bin. You don't want them crawling out of your bin or like being all over the lid. You want them down in the things eating. So you've got to drill those holes so they know to go down, because worms will naturally go to where it's dark.
You know what's weird? Or maybe it's not. I don't know. I've never thought about worms breathing before.
Oh, I think that that's fair.
But like when I like really think about it, like, yeah, they're down in the dirt, but obviously oxygen makes its way down there. But when it rains, like, they all come to the surface. and like hang out, and they're totally fine. So I guess they do breathe. But how weird. Things you just don't think about.
Right. And well, I mean, I don't know if this is exactly why worms come to the surface, but they'll drown in water.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense.
So if the soil is too saturated, I think they might come up to the surface to get air.
Yeah. And then that's just a really happy day for my chickens.
Yeah. Mine too. And my ducks. Oh my gosh.
Yes. Savages.
So to get started with your worm bin, what you're going to do is you're going to add, or here's what I did. I added a mix of shredded paper that's been wet down, kind of like to the consistency of a wet sponge. And I put a bit of kitchen scrap food in it, and then the worms go in. And pro tip, your worms like the bin to have kind of sat there for a few days and started cooking before you add them. So you want to be sure and set your bin up and put all of the items in it a few days before they show up, because then they can start kind of eating and getting to town right away. And everything that you put in your worm bin, you want to make sure and cut it into small pieces, because your worms will process it faster than if it's like a full giant thing. And the worms that you want to start your bin with are called red wigglers. And I ordered mine from Uncle Jim's Worm Farm. And there will be a link to Uncle Jim's Worm Farm in the show notes. So you can order some from there if you would like. Those worms are also great fishing worms. Fun fact. So if you're a fisherman or a fisherwoman, or you like to fish, I guess is a better way to say that, then your worm bin can have a couple of uses rather than just composting. And you can totally feed some worms to your chickens and ducks and other fowl if you'd like to do that as well. And earthworms aren't great candidates for a worm composting system. They're just not the same as these red wigglers are. So you want to make sure that you're starting out with a worm that is specifically good for these types of bin systems.
So do you consider yourself like a worm connoisseur at this point in your life?
I don't know if I would call myself a worm connoisseur yet. I am just starting, but you've known me long enough now. You know almost probably verbatim what I said to my husband as soon as we set up the first one. I was like, maybe worm farming is going to be my thing. And I'm going to have like 70 of these things, and I'm going to sell composting worms locally.
And did he just like kind of nod and smile, or did he have some comments about that?
I think he like heavy breathed, and then that was it.
Oh my God. Oh.
Yeah, I can't just have an idea and leave it. Like I have to take it all the way through in my brain.
Yeah. I mean, there are worse like sectors of farming you could probably try to get into. Worm farming is probably one of the more entry level, easier access things for you to do.
Well, yeah. And one of the reasons why I kind of thought about it is because we do have a couple of local restaurants here. So I thought I could maybe take some of their food waste, like ends of lettuce or like carrots or, like things that they probably normally throw in the trash just because they're big and it's easier for them. But if I gave them a trash bin specifically for food waste, maybe I could get them to throw it in it. And then I could help cut some of my little town's food waste. And then the other reason was because I would have preferred to buy worms locally or just get worms from a friend because they're really prolific. Like they totally breed like crazy. So once you start having worms, like you're going to have a gajillion worms.
Gosh.
Yeah. So I thought, like, since I couldn't find any, maybe I can be that person that starts this and then people can pick up worms locally instead of having to, use the energy required to have them shipped. Because, when you're starting to think about, those things that you can do to like have closed loop systems or like more local systems, like that's a good place to start. Just getting stuff from friends.
Did you know we have fun teas and drinkware just for the listeners of Drinkin' Farm?
That's right. When you buy yourself awesome gear from our shop, not only do you get to drink and farm in style, but your purchase also helps support this show.
And with your support, we're able to do new fun things for you, like producing additional shows, improving our sound quality, and providing more free downloads to help you on your farm.
So go to drinkandfarm.com/shop to see what's new.
So you were just talking about, ends of lettuce and getting food waste from people. So what exactly can go into this worm bin?
That is an excellent question because it's really important that you only put things that your worms can actually eat in there. Otherwise, you could kill your worms or end up with a really stinky mess. So food scraps can go in it, and that includes things like melon rinds, roots, stems, leaves, cores, husks can go in there, seeds, skins, peels, all of those things can go in your worm composting bin. And you can also put eggshells, but not like the inside of the egg. They don't need that, just the shell. And you want to crush it. In fact, so worms use it kind of like chickens do, like as grit.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. You can also put seaweed. I don't live by the sea, but maybe somebody else does. And rinsed seashells, like oyster shells, can go in there as well. You'd want to crush those up also. But shrimp peels or like lobster tails, those do not go in the worm composting bin. You can give those to your chickens. You can also put some really interesting stuff in there, like natural fiber clothing. So if you have like old cotton t-shirts or socks, you can shred those up and throw them in there. Apparently they'll eat those. Or natural yarn or fiber. So like fiber, so you could put like the stuff that you brush off of your farm animals in there, like their undercoat, or even, like their outer hair is fine too. Or if you're a spinner, like your extra fiber from spinning that can go in there. And so can yarn, like if you have naturally dyed yarn, so that would be like yarn that's dyed with like plants, but not like acid dyes. That's what they mean by like natural fibers. They can't be like the dyed stuff. You can put those in there too. Like if you've had any that have been moth-eaten or have like felted for any reason and just aren't usable for your projects, those can go in there. Non-glossy paper products. So like cardboard, newspapers, magazine inserts, the tubes from the inside of your paper towels or toilet paper, all of those things can go into that bin and your worms will eat them. And tea leaves and tea bags can go in there too. Just make sure that you remove the staple.
Oh, yeah.
And they love coffee and coffee filters. Ugh. So like coffee it up.
So are worms like your spirit animal then? Because you've been drinking coffee an awful lot on the podcast.
Perhaps. You can also put like dead plants in there, grass clippings, pine needles, and leaves. Just make sure that they haven't been sprayed with pesticides because you don't want to accidentally kill your worms. Because, pesticides have like a half-life. So they aren't dangerous per se after a certain time. But if you don't know when they were sprayed, like, you could totally accidentally kill your worm bin. Feathers can go in there and hair. So hair from you, hair from your animals. Yeah. Dryer lint can go in there as well. And the only thing really that you need to keep in mind if you put any of those things in, like I said earlier, is make sure that they cut up, maybe make sure that they're cut up really small so that your worms can process them easily.
So then, okay, so we know what we can put in there now, but what are some of the things that you should not put in there?
So you shouldn't put any citrus in there. So like no limes, lemon, grapefruit, or the juice, the rinds or the juice. Don't put any of that stuff in there because that'll make the soil too acidic for the worms. You also don't want to put onions or garlic in there because a good rule of thumb is that if it makes you smell, it'll make your worm bin smell.
Oh.
Yeah. No meat, fats, grease, bones, or oils So no butter or like stock from soups or anything like that. You also don't want to give them any plastic or plastic coated paper because they can't digest those things. They are not plastic eaters yet. Maybe someday some worms will evolve into plastic eaters. That would be amazing. It wouldn't surprise me.
That would probably be a pretty scary looking worm.